Is there something about the internet, do you think, that poses a greater challenge to the observant community than other technological advances over the years?
I think that the internet poses unprecedented challenges to all people, nothing to do with the observant Jewish community, and I think it's widely recognized that that's the case. The sheer ubiquity of it, the fact that it's so powerful, and now the fact that it follows one around wherever he goes. These are things that are unprecedented, and because from an observant Jewish perspective, the outside world is something that includes a lot of things that are to be kept at arm's length, if not a larger length. It's only magnified, it's only complicated. All the challenges of the internet become all the more complicated and challenging to an observant Orthodox Jew.
So what do you suggest? Does Agudath Israel have any position on what should be done?
Not really. We leave that to individuals to talk to their personal mentors, religious mentors. For a person in a yeshiva, that would be his yeshiva dean most likely, or his rebbe, his individual teacher. For people who are homeowners and workers, the typical layperson, that would be his or her rabbi. And there are a lot of options out there. One option that is becoming increasingly difficult is simply to be offline entirely, not to have access to the internet. For some people that's workable, and for those people that's the way to do it if they can manage that way. As society, well, for lack of a better word, progresses, I guess that's the word one would use, and the internet becomes all the more indispensable, then obviously there have to be controls put on, like any other technology. But as you say, the controls here are a little less effective than controlling some other technologies.
Do you suggest that people avoid the internet entirely if they can?
If they can, certainly, absolutely.
Why is that?
Because why start up with a wild animal if you don't have to? Let sleeping lions lie, that's for sure. Anything that's positive that one can get from the internet, one can get elsewhere as well, perhaps with a little bit more effort. And the negative things one can get from the internet are overwhelming, and it brings the entire world literally into one's living room or into one's suit pocket.
Forget about, obviously, what I think pretty much everyone, Jewish or not Jewish, would consider evils of the internet, porn and getting weapons or that sort of thing. What about like Facebook and connecting with old friends or reading the news?
Well, there's several levels to answering that question. One is that things that the larger society sees as positive, like Facebook, and even in the larger society, there are dangers that have been exposed in both regarding privacy and also regarding safety of people, particularly young people. Those things are magnified for a population that wants to be insular, that sees insularity as a high ideal, not as something that's unfortunate, but something that we're proud of. We are proud to be insular. We don't cut ourselves off from interactions with people for the sake of avoiding them, but neither do we pursue assimilation, so to speak, of being part of society entirety. We tend to reject, for instance, the entertainment industry.
I mean, even connecting, among fellow observant Jews.
Yeah, well, there are other ways to do that. There are synagogues, and there are events, and there are study halls. It's an easy way to do it, but easy isn't always better. And I think even the larger world recognizes that, and certainly the observant world does. And there, too, you're opening a door to one thing, but once the door is open a crack, the wind comes in. Everything else comes in with it. So that's on one level that we don't see things in the same positive light that other people might see with regard to social media.
There are observant Jewish organizations that do use the internet and completely embrace it. Chabad, for instance, gets nearly 2 million unique visitors every month, and I interviewed the head of media relations there, who says that the Rebbe preached that if it was discovered, then it must have been made for a purpose. And they're not only on the internet, they're doing apps, they're on Twitter, they're doing everything. What would be your response to that?
Well, they follow their own lights, and they're welcome to do that. And I do agree with them, at least in principle, that this is the purpose of the internet. Whether we're at the point where it should be embraced for that purpose is something else. I think it might not happen until the Messiah arrives, and then we can borrow the internet for nothing but good things. But at the moment, because of all the bad things, and it's not just the obvious things like porn or inappropriate entertainment or things like that. And it's not even the social media in and of itself. It's also a colossal waste of time. Anybody who has the internet knows how, with the click of a button, you can check the world in you can check every corner of the world to find out what's doing there, and it becomes very enticing to do that. You know, what's happening in this country, and what about this topic that interests me? And then we'll go from one site to another, and before you know it, it's lunchtime, and then supper time, and then time to go to bed. And that's a very, very dangerous thing for an observant Jew, because we're told to value every moment of time, and if it's not used for either work, it should be used for introspection, for study, or recreation if it's necessary, but that's in order to rejuvenate oneself. We take vacations, but we don't take a daily vacation. And if there's time that we can spend in the study hall, time we can spend listening to a class, time we can spend studying with another Jew, sitting and focusing on Torah, that's what that time should be used for. And the internet sucks up that time like nothing ever has in history.
That's definitely true. What about reading commentary and the actual Tanakh on the internet itself?
Well, there are tremendous offerings, and I can't deny that. One can study Daf Yomi, which the Siyum HaShas, the upcoming Siyum HaShas is celebrating on the web, and one can get all sorts of commentaries, and one can check so many books that one would have to be in a huge library to be able to consult. One can do it now with a click of a finger. And it's very, very enticing and very, very wonderful that happens. But these are two separate things. You know, it's sort of like nuclear energy. It has a tremendous potential, and it can solve all of our energy needs, but it also has a tremendous danger, and one doesn't affect the other, even as the potential is there, even as it's realized. At the same time, the dangers are also looming.
So if you can study it with a book, do it because that way you won't hit the browser to somewhere else.
And to be true confessions, I've done it both ways, and there's nothing like doing it from a book.
Okay. Let's talk about bans. There was originally an effort to ban the internet that emanated, from a number of different rabbis. It seemed that here, the ones in Lakewood Yeshiva were really taking the lead on this. What happened? What were they asking for?
Well, the word bans it's a
cherem.
Well, it wasn't technically a cherem, but it was a statement. I think these are really best characterized as memoranda. They're aimed at the people who look to these rabbis, these elders, for guidance in their lives. That's who they're aimed at. So calling them a ban makes it seem a lot worse than it is. What it is it's a memorandum saying this is a dangerous technology, stay away from it. Now, that attitude was the proper attitude at the advent of the internet, and perhaps it still is to some elders. But as time goes on and situations change, so the realities make it that sometimes we have to guide people, or not we, but our elders have to guide us in different directions in order to roll with the punches, so to speak. So as it becomes more and more necessary to have internet in order to travel, and in order to make purchases, and in order to simply do business, which is how we make our living. Most of us have businesses and whatnot in the Orthodox community, and those businesses, those schools, those yeshivos all need to have some sort of interaction with the internet. So then the rabbinic guidance will change somewhat, and it'll be what I think I've heard most often, which is to make sure that you have controls and you have means of limiting what the internet can access for you, what you can access through the internet. And therefore, these are not seen best as bans in entirety, even though at one point they may have been that, but rather as updates to the realities that are, and they're intended to guide the people who want to be guided by these elders in what they are supposed to do. I think a mistake that's often made is that it's meant to change Jewish society. And they say, well, these bans failed, they never work. That's nonsense. If that's the goal that one imagines the bans, so to speak, having, of course they fail, because they can't accomplish that. Only the people who listen to these elders will have an effect on them. People who don't care what the elders say are not going to care what they say in regarding anything. So they're successful if the goal that one understands that they have, the goal of these memoranda, is to let the faithful followers know where the elders' minds are on a topic. Of course they succeed, because they're publicized, and the people who want to receive this guidance read it, and they get the guidance, and then they act accordingly. So I would say they are successful.
Right, but what's the point of putting them up if they're not going to be followed?
Well, they are going to be followed, but by the people who care to follow them.
So the rabbis don't care if other people don't follow them?
They care. They would love them to, but they know, they're realistic, and they know that they're not going to be able to change people's behavior if those people are not given over to these elders and do not see these elders as their guides. So, for instance, if you have a Rosh Yeshiva, a head of a Din of a yeshiva, he can reasonably expect that his Talmidim, his students in the yeshiva, will want to know, even those who've graduated and moved on, will want to know what that Rosh Yeshiva, what that elder has to say about a topic. And he might say, this medium is not a good one. Stay away from it. Don't have it. And they'll want to say that. They may want to call him up afterwards and talk to him about it and say, but I need it for this, need it for that, and then they'll get a more specific prescription. But he wants to communicate with them. And the way that that's done in the Orthodox community is with these so-called bans, quote unquote, or statements, I would call them.
Are you familiar with the website Buzz is Nice?
Yes, I've seen it.
Here's an advisory, or that's what you call it, I think, a memorandum on this. A warning, because Azara means warning.
Correct. Serious warning, it says, actually.
Yeah. So can you explain to me why a serious warning was put out on that?
I can only speculate, but my speculation is that having seen these sites that are Orthodox in origin, they tend to attract in what they basically are aggregators. They simply take news stories from other places and post them for better or worse. I don't know if that's even legal, but it's done widely. And what they tend to attract are a lot of comments, and mostly anonymous comments. And some of the commenters are clearly people with, how shall I put it, too much time on their hands. And it's obvious why they have that time on their hands, because they don't have the faculties for critical thinking, and they don't have the ability to be polite and to be reasonable. And some of them can be quite ranty and quite crazy. I think that that's another danger of the internet that is extremely important to an Orthodox Jew, is that we consider speaking of us in a certain way, especially about other people, to be an extremely serious sin if it's negative. And that seems to be what most of comments on many such sites embody. A lot of ill will, of course anonymously, so people can let loose. Everybody seems to have a different persona online when they're anonymous than they do in their daily living. And some of those personas are quite shocking and ugly. And I think that if there was a warning given to stay away from these sites, I think it was probably because of the kinds of comments that are freely allowed onto those sites. Whether they are cleared by the site master or not, they're all there. And it's not just that site, it's basically any site that has an Orthodox provenance that attracts such people.
Some folks, I mean, a number of firm individuals go onto the site just to get the news.
Yes.
They see a warning like that, and in my Hebrew isn't fantastic, but I can understand enough of it to know that there are, that it's not like a flip warning that they're putting up. They're talking about the dangers and the fact that it's all sorts of salaciousness and sinning. What about, the person who does VIN is putting the news out there. People want to get the news.
Well,
so why
I can't speak for these rabbis, but I guess I say...
They referred calls that when I tried talking to them, they referred me to you.
Oh, really? Okay.
So they put you on the spot.
You call these rabbis?
Yes.
Oh, really? Interesting. I haven't even read it now. I've seen this general thing. It'll take more than a moment. It's pretty long. But again, I don't think it's news per se. If it was news, then they would obviously ban one listening to the news on the radio or seeing or getting any of the even Orthodox newspapers. And none of them do that. The Orthodox newspapers, there are two major ones. One's a daily, an English language daily. The only one in the country, only Jewish English language daily, is a quote-unquote ultra-Orthodox paper. Nobody says not to read it. So why would a website be different? And the answer is because the website is not overseen by rabbinical supervision of any sort, and it's just the webmaster's decision of what stories to put up and what stories not to put up. He might err in his judgment. I'm not saying he has. I don't know. I have never done a study of it. But these rabbis presumably have, where they've been shown things from that website that made them feel that it's not something that can be trusted by a Jew who wants their guidance. Again, I have to keep that in mind. This is warning the people who are going to care what the names on this list have to say. And those people will stop and say, well, he feels that this website has stuff in it that I shouldn't be seeing. I might just choose not to click onto that website. But again, I think that the main sin of the website, so to speak, lie not in the news aggregation, but in the comments. And that's what most people go to it for. If they want news, they'll go to CNN. If they want to, they'll go to the source. They'll go to the New York Times. But if they wanted to see what does the next guy have to say about this, what good sarcasm and cynicism can I find in the comments here? Oh, look, there's 100 comments, and they're all talking about something that's not even on topic, but it's salacious or it's interesting. I think that that's the danger that was perceived by the people who felt they wanted to target a particular website. But again, I can't speak for them because I'm not privy to their thinking.
Well, there are some who do read the website who are observant who say that around the time that this Asara Hamora came out, he was reporting on sexual predators within the community, and that there was a belief that any talk of that should be clamped down. That reporting on that and exposing of that should be clamped down.
I don't know that I don't know if it's an appropriate topic for a website, especially because of the comments that will follow. Because I've seen perfectly fine and responsible reportage of those kinds of events, those kinds of happenings, and yet seen in the commentary to them, in the comments, all sorts of accusations against innocent people and all sorts of insinuations about institutions and individuals that were not mentioned in the story and have nothing to do with the story. Here too, again, this is a sensitive topic, not because the community is not grappling with it. It is, very much so. This organization, Agudath Israel of America, has an annual convention. This topic has been on the roster for years. And it's something, however, though, that requires a certain amount of deliberation and care in discussing it for a number of reasons. I would imagine if that was the time when this came out, that the judgment of these rabbis was that the due deliberation and care in how to provide the information that was necessary was not taken. And I'm not surprised if that's the case because, let's face it, internet sites are interested in eyeballs, not in accuracy, not in responsibility, not in Torah, not in halacha, but in eyeballs. And when eyeballs are what's up in play, then anything goes in order to capture more of them.
There's another website that's far less known. It's called Adkan Enough. It's run anonymously by a woman who we interviewed, who has to do it anonymously. She has a wall of shame there, where she gets tips of people, predators within the community. She works with the DA. She writes her own blog about being a survivor of incest and of rape. But she says that if she didn't do it anonymously, then she could have all sorts of repercussions against her. Would you agree?
I have no idea. I mean, I really couldn't tell you. I've heard stories where people have been bothered because they said something. On the other hand, I know many cases where people have come forth and talked about what things that happened to them, and nothing happened to them. I mean, there was no threat of any sort. Certainly, we don't condone any such thing. As a matter of fact, recently, when a halachic decision was rendered that was very unpopular among many people outside the Orthodox community because they understood it as saying that one cannot go to the authorities with a credible report, which it never said. I think it was interesting that the part of the reaction was that this is going to foster intimidation of people, when the ruling said so clearly that there's a requirement when there's a credible report of abuse of any sort to go to the authorities after due process of ascertaining that it's a credible report. You don't need witnesses, you don't need documentation, you don't need a videotape, but you do need a certain amount of credibility. Once that's ascertained, one is required to go to the authorities. So how would anybody who accepts this halachic ruling justify to himself to intimidate someone who did what the ruling told him to do? So it's certainly anyone who would intimidate a reporter is in violation of halacha, of Jewish law. So all I can tell you is I can't say whether the woman's right that she would be hurt in some way or would be bothered by people. I can't say that because people do all sorts of things that they shouldn't do.
And Vin, I mean, wouldn't he consider that intimidation, the SRO?
I would hope not. I mean, they have the right to free speech like he does, like anyone does. And no one has to listen to either of them if that's not what they want to do.
I mean, this one is also, this is going after his advertisers in particular. It's also to advertise it.
Well, that's also entirely legal. Whether I would choose to do that or not is a separate question. Whether it's an effective approach, I have no idea. But it's certainly well within the bounds of what's reasonable if they do feel that this website is a bad thing. Again, I can't say one way or the other. I've never done a study of the website. But I do feel that there's some very, very great people on this list, and if the signatures are bona fide, then they apparently felt, and perhaps they still feel, that website should be off limits to an observant Jew. Now, whether the website may have changed in the interim, maybe perhaps as a result of this, and that now they no longer feel that way, I have no idea. This is dated when?
This was probably, I think, last November or so.
Okay, so if it hasn't been followed up, then perhaps it's no longer, in effect. I couldn't tell you that one way or the other. You'd have to talk to the rabbis and ask them. But
I tried.
It's not easy. They're busy. They're busy men.
Do you think that any of these rabbis would want to talk to me?
I don't know. Probably not.
I had a feeling you were going to say that.
Well, I'm being realistic because when I say they're busy men, I do mean they're busy men. These are people whose entire lives are taken up with their students, their studies, their congregants, and to them the whole world of media is something that is it's a conceit of the modern era. It's not held up on a pedestal like many of us think of it.
All right, let me talk about your other favorite website, which gets a tremendous amount of traffic from people in the Frum community around New York. Failed Messiah. Why do people go to it?
From what I understand, and I'm not going to judge the website because I haven't done a study of it either, and I'm not going to comment on what I think is the mental state of an individual. But I think that the fact that there's a lot of salacious material there and a lot of things that will draw eyeballs, for better or for worse, whether they're accurate or not, a lot of cynicism, a lot of anger, these are things that attract certain kinds of people the way that certain kinds of things attract flies. And I think that the mainstream media has abetted this by seeing it as a place, among others, from where they can get some what they think is dirt on the Orthodox community, and all sorts of bad things come from that. Take a recent example, and I only know about this because it was in a different news organ. One of the New York tabloids borrowed something from that website, apparently, and I understand the webmaster was upset at the fact that he wasn't credited, which says something about the eyeball question again. About exposing a terrible, terrible scandal in Williamsburg where store owners, private property owners, dared to put up a sign about the dress code because women were coming in the usual summer dress of the Bohemians in Williamsburg, and the store owners are pious Jews who don't want to be exposed to naked flesh. And of course, that's their prerogative, and they're relying in that very much on what the Talmud teaches, what a Jewish man is supposed to do. So they put up a sign saying that we're not allowing people in here unless they're dressed a certain way. They weren't asking them to wear veils or to wear, Hasidic clothing. They just didn't want them to come in a totally uncovered way. And this is a terrible scandal. How dare they? And the tabloid put it as a violation of rights, and commenters commented how horrible this is, how the Jews are taking over the world, the usual stuff. Now, of course, it's entirely within the rights of any store owner to put up any dress code he wants. You can't get into a certain restaurant without a tux or a suit and jacket, and a tie. And in this case, obviously, it's not exactly a mainstream American dress code, but it's their right in their community, and it's a very insular community, to put up whatever sign they want to, and they can't discriminate on the basis of race or on the basis of religion, and they're not doing that. But they can ask a customer to come in not naked. There's nothing wrong with that. And it became a terrible scandal. Now, why is it a scandal? It's not. But why is it made into a scandal? Because of the eyeballs again. Got to get the tabloids. They're in competition with the web, and the web is in competition with the papers, and everybody's trying to get their readers. And the website you mentioned is the source of all this. So it's just a recent example of how something that is fueled by ill will and by cynicism and by looking down at Jews who are perhaps different from him turns into something that the whole world gets to see and is led by the nose to think of in a negative way. That's a tragedy.
He says he's under tremendous threats. I mean,
I could only say I have never threatened him. I don't know. You know, I can say
you did appear to liken him to the author of the Protocols of the Elders of Zion.
I did. I don't think I did that at all. I think what
there was that picture. I saw it. I mean, the picture was like that classic Jew. Like
right. What happened was I don't remember if it was his website or another similar website, but the way that they were portraying the Orthodox, the so-called ultra-Orthodox, the Haredi community, was as the Nazis portrayed the Jews as a group. And that is entirely not just arguable, but it's beyond argument, because if you read the article that illustration, which I think was a brilliant illustration, accompanied, you would see there that a totally innocuous meeting aimed at curbing abuse in the Orthodox community was put forth as a sinister Jewish plot to avoid precisely what it was doing. Now, if that doesn't remind a person of how anti-Semites refer to Jewish gatherings and imagine them as being malevolent, then something's wrong. That's exactly what they are. And that's what that illustration was trying to show, that on the contrary, he and they, those kinds of sites and those kinds of people, are trying to portray Jews who aren't like them in a malevolent and an evil way.
But do you see the role of these sites and the press as at all positive in exposing wrongdoing, or would you just prefer that it be handled internally under the normal auspices of rabbinic control?
I think that there certainly is a potential for a site to be a responsible place of interaction on any of a number of important issues that perhaps aren't discussed enough. And this, at least until recently, was such an issue. And I would have welcomed a site that did it responsibly. Can I say that I know of a site like that? No, it's interesting.
Oh, okay.
All the sites that I've seen, which are usually sent to me, links are sent to me by people, are doing it in a very irresponsible manner, by lashing out, by being cynical, by naming people who are not involved in things, and naming people, even someone who's accused of a crime, does not necessarily, if he's in custody or something, doesn't need to be named by an Orthodox site. That's a halakhic question whether that should be done or not. I'm not saying one way or the other, but I don't think they give a tinker's damn about whether they name somebody and maybe they're wrong or maybe the person's innocent. They couldn't care less. The sites that are popular out there. I think a responsible site would be a positive thing, and I don't think it would get very many eyeballs though, so it wouldn't last.
Just for the record, I mean, he gets comments along the lines of, the question is, what's going to happen to this website when Shmari is found dead in his undies, whacked by some vigilante chassids? He has to carry a gun. He talks with the federal agents.
That's a terrible thing if it's true, and obviously he's so far managed to do what he's doing without any ill effect that I know of, and I would certainly not wish him harm or feel that anybody should wish him harm. I think what we should wish him is that he stop and think about what he's done and what he does, like any person should do, and introspect. And if that leads him to a different direction, then wonderful. He's welcome to interact with Jews in a responsible manner. But anybody who interacts in an irresponsible manner, in a malicious manner, it's unfortunate. It's not someone. There's no vigilante justice, and no one's summoning him or anybody to a court, to a Jewish court. But that doesn't mean that we have to accept what he's doing as legitimate. It's not legitimate. It's Jewishly illegitimate. And I don't speak of any particular site. I speak about all the sites that are dedicated to trying to besmirch Orthodox Jews and, in truth, Orthodox Judaism.